Hi, I'm going to teach you 10 tips for baking on the Blackstone Griddle. Baking on the Blackstone Griddle is a lot of fun. I've been cooking on the Blackstone Griddle for a couple years. I'm a baker by trade. I've been baking professionally for over 20 years. And I didn't find a lot of baking recipes on the griddle. So my family really likes treats, especially after a good meal. And so I'm like, why not create recipes while I'm cooking other things on the Blackstone Griddle? So I've came up with a few tips that you need that is good for when you bake on the griddle. The griddle temperature. This is really important. A lot of people like to do too high of a griddle temperature. So the one thing with the griddle, you want it low. So turn it on, turn it as low as you can get it. The lowest setting that yours will go. So you turn it on and then turn it as low as it'll go. You want basically the residual heat. You don't want so much the heat from the griddle itself. So that's why you want it low and slow, because I'm going to show you why in another one of the tips on why it is not to have it so hot. Tip number 9 is wind guards. A lot of people like to use the wind guards, or they like to use the scrapers that they get from the Dollar Tree alongside of the griddle as wind guards. You do not want that when you're baking. The reason is the griddle, the flat top will get too hot, and it'll burn anything you try to cook on it. It's going to burn the bottom of it, and the top is not going to be done, and it just won't work very well. So no wind guards when you're baking. Tip number 9. Tip number 8 is the baking stone. This one I discovered while I was working, trying to do pizzas on the flat top, and when I did the pizzas directly on the flat top, I was having a hard time. It was burning. It wasn't turning out as good as I had liked. So I discovered the baking stone. If you've ever used one of these in your ovens, a lot of people swear by these. They really like baking cookies on these. And so I decided, I had it in my cupboard, I'm going to bring it out and try it and absolutely love it. You just heat up the griddle, do it on low, but when you start it, you want to place this on the griddle so this actually warms up as the griddle is warming up. So this is tip number 8. Use a griddle stone if you want to bake awesome cookies. Tip number 7. The baking rack. Wire rack, it's called different things for different uses. It has a little leg on the bottom of it to hold it up off the griddle. It works awesome. You take whatever it is that you're baking, and it's going to lift it up off the griddle just enough so you get the heat from the griddle, but it's not going to burn on the bottom. This I use quite a bit on the griddle for different things, in the corner for heating, if I cook something and want to just keep it warm. But this for baking, it is awesome. Just placing it on there, and then you put your pans, whatever you're going to cook, directly on top of this, and it works awesome. Tip number 6 is your baking pans. A lot of people are like, can you even put pans on a Blackstone flat top griddle? Yes, you can. I've done it and it works awesome. You can use a different size. The muffin cups, the little ones, works great. You could put directly on the griddle. You can put it on the wire rack. A lot of times, if you find that your griddle is too hot and your muffins or your cupcakes are burning, put it on top of the wire rack, then the pan itself, and then you could bake with it that way. I have baked directly on top of the griddle, and the bottoms will get a golden brown, nice and golden brown. So if you're fine with that, you can do directly on the griddle. These pans, I recommend not using large pans, you know, cake size pans. It's just too hard to get it done correctly. Smaller, the better. So if you're going to do a cake, do a couple small cakes versus a big, large cake. Or do, if you want to use a little bit larger, like an 8 or a 9-inch pan, just don't put as much batter in it. Do thinner layers in your cakes, and the pans work out good. But I found with when you're baking the cake itself in a pan, if you put it directly on the griddle, it's going to burn before it's actually done. So you need to lift it up off of the griddle, which the wire rack works perfect for it. So put the wire rack down, your cake in there, or if you're doing brownies, you can also do it in a pan like this. Put it on top of the wire rack like that, and you can bake it that way. Pans work perfect on the Blackstone Griddle. Tip number 5 is using a foil pan or a cast iron pan like this. You can get the disposable ones at the dollar store. You can get really cheap, $1.25 now. It's not actually the dollar store anymore, but these work perfect. Cast iron pans work really good. Kitchen metal pans work good, but when you're deep frying, these are your friend. So you can deep fry on the Blackstone Griddle. I've made donuts on the griddle using a pan like this set on here. You do need to turn the heat up higher when you're using oil, when you're trying to get the oil to heat up. So you fill the pan up halfway, maybe a little bit more, with oil, and heat the oil up to temperature 350, 375, and then you can make your donuts or whatever bakery item that you want on here. This works awesome. I've done it so many times. I actually do the deep fried French fries if I'm doing like burgers and stuff. This works perfect for it. I also do like appetizers, loaded tater tots I've made, and that you can find on my website. I have all different kind of appetizer recipes you can find on my website that call for the deep frying, but foil pans work awesome to do baked items on the Blackstone. Tip number 4, we're getting down to the good stuff now. So tip number 4 is sheets of foil. So if you do not have a wire rack, take sheet of foil. Actually, you're going to take a couple sheets of foil. So just take it long ways like this. So depending on whatever it is that you are cooking, baking on the Blackstone Griddle. So you take one like that. And you want to loose crumple it. Don't like really crumple it so that it's tight. You want it loose. Another one, same way, long ways, like that. Loose crumple it. And you're going to make an X. Like smoosh it down a little bit on the center so that it's flat. Then you're going to take your pan that you're using, whether it is a cake pan, anything that you're kind of baking, muffins, cupcakes, then take and put it on here. Just make sure that it's level when you do it. So it just lifts it up a little bit off the Blackstone Griddle, and that way you won't have any burns on on your cupcakes or your muffins. So another way, just lifting it up, you'll still get the residual heat, but you won't get the direct heat from the bottom on your whatever it is that you're baking. Tip number 3. This is probably one of my favorites. I'm one of those, I do a lot of scratch baking, but a lot of times I hate doing stuff from scratch. I hate pulling all the flour, the sugar, the baking soda, and all that out, especially if you're camping. This is tip number 3. Pre-packaged mixes. These work awesome. You can do the sugar cookie mix, the muffin mix, cake mixes, which would do cupcakes or regular cakes. These work awesome. If you're camping, have a lot of these. Cost $1 in the store. You can get them $1.90 when they're on sale. Grab a whole bunch of them, throw them in your pantry, and you have them for whenever you want to have a muffin for the morning, when you're making your breakfast and stuff. If you want to bake some muffin, it's easy to throw together, whip together, and boom, you can have an awesome snack for your family to enjoy. Getting down to the good stuff now. Tip number 2 is dome lids. I have a couple different kinds. We keep them underneath our griddle, so the dome lids work perfect. This is one of your top things for baking. You're going to want a dome lid when you're baking, because this is a whole trick of doing it correctly. Is you're placing the pan You're placing the rack down on the griddle. You're taking your pan that has your cake in it. You can either use the round one if it's small enough, put it over there. The heat is going to go up and it's going to work around, and it's going to cause an oven effect around your dish that you're trying to bake. So this is definitely what you need if you're going to do any baking. So use the heat from the griddle that comes up and around what it is you're baking. A lot of times if I have the wire rack that I'm using like that, I like to use this oval, this rectangle shape for placing over top, and it covers the whole thing, so you have the whole, you don't have any air escaping in, cold air. It just has the heat circulating around just like it would an oven. So I've invested in these and I absolutely love them versus the round ones, just because I found they're not big enough for me for whatever it is that I'm doing. I like to do cupcakes. If I do the cupcake pan, that's the perfect size. Put it over top, leave it, let it cook for several minutes, and then check it. Like when you check it, don't take and flip it up like this and let the heat escape. You want, when you're checking it, if you lift it up just a little bit and set it over on the griddle, the heat will stay inside the pan, inside the dome lid. So then you can check what it is, check to see if it's done or not. If it's not done, then lift it back up and over a top, and then you still have the heat in the dome lid. So then it can keep on cooking that way. So that is tip number 2, using the dome lids. They're your friend when you're baking. Tip number 1, this is my favorite. I discovered this after baking on the griddle. My family sometimes would complain that the cupcakes or whatever tasted kind of funny, and I soon discovered that when I was baking something and I put the dome lid over top of what it is I was baking, the smoke from the heat from the griddle was coming up, and it was actually smoking the cupcakes that I was baking on there. So, and I didn't want that. So I discovered that parchment paper works awesome. So before I start, I have the griddle all heated up. I will take a sheet of the parchment paper, lay it down onto the griddle, but you want it big enough so that it's going to, you can put your rack down on top of it, and then your pan on top of that, and then the dome lid is going to go over top of all of it. But you want it big enough so that this is blocking the smoke that's creating from the hot griddle to come up into your items that you're trying to bake. So parchment paper works awesome. It does not burn on the griddle unless you keep on using it over and over and over again. I use it the one time and then I'll pull it off, and then if I need another sheet, then I use another sheet. It does get browned a little bit on it, but it doesn't burn. Just make sure your griddle is oiled, and you're good to go. Another thing, parchment paper works great for if you're cooking. If you decide that you want to cook directly on the griddle, parchment paper works just like it would on a baking sheet. So put that down, and it protects whatever it is that you're baking from the griddle, and it'll come up very easily off the griddle. So I found that a lot of times when I do like my cloud eggs, I will use the parchment paper there just so it's easy to get off the griddle, and it just gives it a little bit of a barrier. But then I have a couple bonus tips for you. Another thing that I found is very helpful, make sure that you have oven mitts while you're doing this, because the pans will get very hot. So use your oven mitts to take it off of the griddle. Another bonus tip that I have for you is toothpicks. When you're baking, toothpicks are your friend. So make sure when you think that your cupcakes or your muffins are done or your cake is done, take a toothpick, insert it in, bring it out. If it's clean, then it's good to go. If it's got a little crumbs on it, maybe cook it a minute longer. If there's any doughy part on it at all that comes off on the toothpick, you need to bake it a little bit longer. So it may look like it's done, but if your toothpick does not come out completely clean, it is not done. So this is my bonus tip for baking on the griddle. I hope you enjoyed the 10 tips for baking on the griddle. If you subscribe to my page, you can go to FromMichiganToTheTable.com. I have all kinds of Blackstone recipes. I have Blackstone dessert recipes on there. You can get a wide variety of the ones that I have. Subscribe to my page. If you like this video, click the like button. If you have any questions about baking, put them in the comments down below, and I will answer any questions that you have. If there's some videos that you would like me to produce, like to make for you, write them in the comments down below, and I will see what I can do. Thanks. Bye.